Welcome back to the shop, everybody. Now that we have our miter saw station and shop cabinets in, we're going to take advantage of the great new shop space and we're going to build ourselves a fun project today. We're going to be building ourselves a fishing rod holder that I'm going to be taking up to my camp in Maine. First, let's talk about the project. So, this is a really simple project. This is a great beginner's project if you've never done any woodworking at all. I'm going to be making mine by milling down some stock that I got for free. It's actually going to be this giant chunk of oak that came off of a shipping pallet. But you could make this by going to the big box store, buying some 1x material, buying 2x material. You can literally make this project as simple as you'd like it to be, or you can do some of the things that I'm going to do to make it a little bit fancier, a little bit more refined, a little nicer. Whatever extent you try to take it to, though, this is a really fast project, simple project, and confidence builder. And the best part about it is you get something really practical at the end. And so you can skip these first three steps here if you're going right to the big box store and just buying pre-milled lumber. But I'm going to start off by milling down this piece of beech that came from a shipping pallet. So the first thing I'm going to do is run it through my jointer to get two flat square edges, and then I'm going to bring it over to my table saw. So I'm just using the table saw to cut off this groove that was milled into the side, which I think was for the pallet strap. And then I'm going to also use the table saw to get two 1-inch thick pieces that are going to become each side of the rod holder. So after I have my two pieces out of the larger board, I flipped them over on their sides and I ripped them so that I had two pieces that were 3 inches in width. You can go wider than 3 inches, but I wouldn't go any narrower than the 3 inches. I found that the 3 inches is just about the right width to kind of have enough meat left in the board after you drill your holes for the butt end of the rods. And lastly, in the milling process, I'm just going to take the boards over to the planer and plane them down to their final thickness, which is going to be 1 inch. And that finishes up surfacing the last side of the board. Okay, so everything I just did, totally unnecessary. You can just go to the store, buy yourself the lumber already dimensioned, already surfaced, but as you can see, I now have a nice surfaced board on all four sides that I'm going to go ahead and use to make the fishing rack. Actually, I have two of them, one for each side. One thing I did just want to say is at the beginning of this video, I said this was oak, but I'm actually looking at it. I no longer think it's oak. So you can actually see spalting, that black kind of line in there. And that it generally happens in hardwoods, but it's more so like maple, birch, and I think beech is the other one. I'm not an expert, but this is, after cutting into this is definitely not oak. It looks to be more probably, my guess would be beech. Anyway, still a nice piece of wood that was free. So from here on out, most of these steps are steps that you would follow if you were going to be building this yourself with wood directly from the store. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut both of these to length. They're going to be the exact same length. So basically how I'm making this is either going to be a horizontal rack that can either be mounted directly to your ceiling or to the wall, or with one small modification, you could make it a vertical rack that mounts to your wall. And the only difference will be how you drill the holes on one of the boards here. If you're going to go with the vertical position, you're only going to drill the holes halfway through the board so that the butt end of the fishing rod actually has something to sit on. But if you're going to go ahead and mount them either horizontally on the wall or on the ceiling, you're going to drill that hole all the way through so you can slide the rod through to have something to hang on. I think probably the most common way to position the rods is horizontally or across the ceiling, just due to the length of the rods. So that's how I'm going to build mine. Mine's actually going to go on the ceiling of my my camp. So in my opinion, this is the hardest part of this project, and that's doing your layout for all of the holes you're going to drill. The only important part here, though, is that it's symmetrical from side to side. So if you find the center and then space the rods out from left to right of the center point, you can't go wrong as long as you do the same thing on the left as you do on the right. Beyond that, depending on the type of rods you're putting in here, you may want a little more or a little less room between your rods. I ended up with only 7 rods because I kept my spacing a little wider. But at the end, I was really happy that I did, because I had a few larger rods that needed a little extra space. With the layout done, it was over to the drill press to drill a whole bunch of holes. And the important thing here is that you want to minimize the amount of blowout. So if you have a Forstner bit, I highly recommend using the Forstner bit, because that's going to leave a really clean entry hole. I do also recommend you can drill straight through with the Forstner bit if you have a board underneath it to kind of prevent the blowout. But it is the cleanest if you don't drill all the way through, flip the board over, and then complete the hole from the other side. You'll virtually have no tear out if you flip it. Whereas if you run into a sacrificial board, you may still end up with a little bit of tear out. The other thing I just wanted to mention was the holes are 2 different sizes. The butt end of the rods are 1 5/8", while where the tips of the rods are going to go, they're 1 1/4". And you can kind of see that here. The board further away from me is the end for the butt ends, while the one closer to me is for the tips. Now this next step's only for the board that's going to house the tips of the rods, and what we're doing here is we're setting out our layout lines to cut some slots for the tips of the rods to slide in. Now the angle here really isn't that important. What's important is that when the angle kind of intersects with the hole that you've drilled, that you kind of have a little bit of a ledge on the hole so that the rod can't easily get knocked out. So this angle is going to depend on the hole size that you're drilling. So a larger hole will need a gentler angle, and a smaller hole will need a steeper angle. Anyways, you're going to lay this out. You can kind of put these slots in any directions that are visually appealing for you. And I'm going to cut this out on my bandsaw, but you could go ahead and use a jigsaw to do the same exact thing. With all the slots cut out, I'm going to bring it over to my spindle sander, where I'm just going to go ahead and get the bandsaw marks kind of cleaned up out of there. This isn't the final sanding. I'm going to come back and I'm going to sand everything down to 120 grit, and a lot of that sanding at the end is going to be by hand, because it's going to be it's nearly impossible to get any sort of power sander in where the pinch point is for the rods. Next, I'm going to put a little bit of a scroll into the end of the board. I'm going to do this on one end. Then I'm going to go ahead and sand this down. After this is sanded in a shape that I like it, I'm going to trace that shape onto the other board. I'm going to cut it out of both ends of the other board, and then I'm going to clamp both of these boards together and sand them together on the spindle sander again, so that both ends are exactly the same on both boards. Now, I did have footage of all that, but unfortunately my SD card got corrupted, which I apologize for. I also did have footage of me finishing this, and I ended up finishing it with boiled linseed oil, just rubbing on a few coats of that. And here is the final finished project up at the camp. Again, I ended up losing the footage of the actual installation and some shots of the camp and the lake for you guys, but next time I'm up there, I'll go ahead and get some more footage for the next video. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and check out some of the other content on the channel. Thanks again, guys.